Noir Plasma Chrome Bleed. Unlocking knowledge, inspiring innovation, empowering curious minds.
This website makes learning so easy. I found all my resources here.
Like what you share.
Answer me when I call, O God of my righteousness. Be gracious unto me and hear my prayer. In peace I will both lay me down and sleep.
Welcome to another explainer. Today we're unpacking the absolutely fascinating 3,000-year trajectory of Judaism. We're going to move way beyond the basic definitions you might already know and really uncover its historical, textual, and demographic evolution. We'll explore how this incredibly ancient tradition has dynamically adapted through centuries of massive intellectual shifts, geopolitical upheavals, and modern demographic transformations. So here is our roadmap for today. We'll kick things off with the origins of absolute monotheism, move into Torah, tradition, and major schisms, examine Jewish law and legal oaths, look at demographics and the global diaspora, and then finish up with archaeology and evolving history. All right, let's dive right into Section 1, Origins of Absolute Monotheism. Now, this first stop might actually surprise you. Historically, it was just assumed that strict monotheism emerged as an instantaneous revolution. Bam, one god. But modern textual discoveries, like the Ugaritic texts found back in 1928, prove that early Israelite religion around 1200 BCE was inextricably rooted in a much broader Canaanite polytheistic stratum. The shift was actually a slow, centuries-long evolutionary process. It really wasn't until the traumatic Babylonian exile in 586 BCE that the theological framework fully, officially shifted to absolute monotheism, which is the explicit denial of any other deity's existence. What's really fascinating here is the mechanism of convergence. The early Israelites actually absorbed the traits of Canaanite gods right into Yahweh. During the Iron Age I period, the early pantheon included deities like El, Baal, and Asherah. Over time, Yahweh absorbed El's role as the compassionate creator and Baal's attributes as a storm deity. Concurrently, they used a process of differentiation to slowly excise certain figures from the religion, like the goddess Asherah, who early inscriptions actually refer to as Yahweh's divine consort. Think about that famous poetic quote from Exodus, "Who is like you among the gods, O Lord?" That perfectly anchors the intermediate stage of this evolution, which we call monolatry. Monolatry is the mandate to exclusively worship one national god without actually denying the real existence of other celestial beings. By asking who is like you among the gods, the text is asserting Yahweh's supreme matchlessness relative to the rival deities of neighboring nations at that specific historical moment. Moving right along to Section 2, Torah, Tradition, and Major Schisms. Imagine facing catastrophic geopolitical defeat. For the ancient community, it forced a massive pivot. They had to move from a territorial, altar-centric cult to a deeply text-centric community. The crucial point here is that a dual system became the absolute foundation for normative Jewish law. After the destruction of the Second Temple in 70 CE, the Pharisaic sages pushed the concept that Moses didn't just receive a written text at Sinai, but also an oral tradition. This oral Torah, passed down across generations, was eventually compiled into the Mishnah and expanded in the Talmud, ultimately creating a vast system dependent on rabbinic logic and communal precedent. But as you might expect, not everyone agreed with this. In the 8th century, a major anti-rabbinic movement known as Kharism emerged, creating a massive intellectual schism. The Karaites, which literally means followers of the scripture, strictly championed the written word over oral tradition. They explicitly rejected the Talmud, viewing it as a human invention that distorted divine law. Instead, they championed the Peshat, which relies entirely on the contextual, plain, historical meaning of the scriptural text, exactly as ancient Hebrews would have naturally understood it. Looking at how this intellectual clash played out in real life, it led to radically different daily realities. While both communities maintained absolute monotheism, their practical, day-to-day lives diverged sharply. For instance, rabbinic lineage is matrilineal, Karaite is patrilineal. And when it came to the Sabbath, rabbinic law allows pre-lit fires to burn to provide warmth and light. Classical Karaites, however, banned all fire entirely, meaning they spent the entire day in literal darkness. Also, while rabbinic Jews use a fixed astronomical calendar, Karaites relied on the physical, visual observation of the new moon. This clash was so intense, it actually forced rabbinic leaders to rigorously refine their own philosophy just to defend the Talmud. All right, let's get into Section 3, Jewish Law and Legal Oaths. When we talk about human speech within Jewish jurisprudence, it has immense legal and sacramental power. It isn't just talk, it is deeply binding. Take a netter, for example. It literally changes the legal or halakhic status of an object, rendering something that was permissible suddenly forbidden to use. A shvua, on the other hand, binds the individual person to a specific action or fact. Because false oaths incur such severe divine penalties, ancient courts actually had to develop incredibly complex mechanisms to annul unintentional or destructive declarations. This intense focus on the power of oaths extended all the way into grand theology. There are these metaphorical 3 oaths found in the Talmud that created a really fascinating historical framework. This framework deeply influenced the community's political interactions with the rest of the world during the diaspora. Essentially, it established a theological foundation for political quietism, a mandate to remain politically passive, to avoid rebellion against ruling nations, and to simply wait for divine intervention. It is super interesting to see how one single ancient text can inform radically different socio-political worldviews today. For centuries, traditional Orthodox groups viewed any human attempt to reestablish a Jewish state before the Messianic era as a direct violation of that divine oath. Conversely, modern religious scientists argue that excessive persecution during the Holocaust or international resolutions like the 1947 UN Partition Plan effectively nullified that ancient restriction. It's the exact same text, but entirely different modern applications. Looking externally, European jurisdictions actually institutionalize their own suspicion by imposing incredibly harsh legal rituals on the community. Believing that internal Jewish law allowed individuals to easily annul oaths, Christian courts created something called the Oath Mor Judaico. This mandated that a Jewish witness in a dispute with a Christian had to stand on a pigskin and recite lengthy self-executing curses invoking divine judgment. This humiliating practice persisted in European jurisprudence until the rise of civil equality finally forced its abolition in the mid-19th century. Now for Section 4, Demographics and the Global Diaspora. So, after covering the texts and the laws, where does the global diaspora stand today? 15.7 million. That number represents the estimated global core Jewish population in 2024. To put that into perspective for you, out of roughly 8 billion people on Earth, this represents just about 0.2% of the total human population. And just to be clear, demographers define this core group as individuals who identify as Jewish by religion or ethnic heritage to the exclusion of any other religious identity. And today, we're seeing an extreme geographic concentration. While these populations were once widely dispersed all across Eastern Europe, North Africa, and the Middle East, today over 85% of the entire core population resides in just 2 nations, Israel and the United States. The really big takeaway here for the future is how migration and fertility are totally reshaping the landscape. There's a very strong statistical correlation showing migration toward nations with a high human development index. Because of this, the global demographic center of gravity continues shifting heavily toward Israel. Why? Well, diaspora populations outside Israel exhibit aging profiles and low birth rates, while Israel displays sustained organic growth, with a fertility rate of about 3.0. On top of that, we see a stark, historic decline across Muslim-majority countries, dropping from over 850,000 people in 1948 to roughly 27,000 today. Finally, bringing us to Section 5, Archaeology and Evolving History. Let's circle back to how modern academics actually uncover those ancient polytheistic origins we talked about earlier. For centuries, scholars relied purely on a text-centric model, They read the written scripture and just assumed it offered a direct, monolithic historical account of how ancient Israelite religion developed. But late 20th century physical excavations completely disrupted this text-only model. The academic focus shifted to material archaeology, literally digging into the ground to see what average people were actually doing. And what they found was an absolute game changer. These physical artifacts, including thousands of female terracotta figurines and localized altars, proved that a massive structural gap existed. There was the official state religion dictated by Jerusalem elites, centered on the temple. And then there was the everyday, popular religion of regular agrarian families. In their own domestic spaces, ordinary ancient Israelites were deeply focused on fertility, health, and household protection, using tangible, localized cultic items. It showed us that monotheism wasn't just handed down pre-packaged. It was an emergent, messy, historical property. So I want to leave you with this final thought. Both the ancient dirt of archaeology and modern data charts tell a continuing, brilliant story of survival, adaptation, and intellectual evolution. From absorbing elements of Canaanite culture in Iron Age villages, to the rigorous, heated debates of Karaite and rabbinic scholars, all the way to the unprecedented demographic concentration in high HDI nations today, this is a tradition entirely defined by its dynamic response to change. So, as geopolitical landscapes continue to shift rapidly in the 21st century, how will this ongoing story of adaptation shape the very next era of Jewish history? Thank you so much for exploring this explainer with me today. Keep asking questions and keep learning.
Like what you shared.
This website makes learning so easy. I found all my resources here.
Noir Plasma Chrome Bleed. Unlocking knowledge, inspiring innovation, empowering curious minds.